Welcome, and thank you for attending this training today. My name is Gloria Giraldo. I would like to tell you a little bit about me. I am currently working for the CCRNR in Bergen County. Have been working with the CCR for 22 years now. The Growing Brain training curriculum that we are going to study today has been available for 3 years now, and it was elaborated by the agency 023, and it has been presented nationwide. Trainers use to come to Washington to become certified trainers, but due to the pandemic, the certification is available online. This certification is available for home visitors, practitioners in early childhood field, programs for parents, and early interventionists, The science of initial brain development allows us to make informed decisions in our programs. These are some of the learning objectives for today. To identify factors that affect brain growth and development, to understand the impact of stress on brain development, and to learn about the 5 R's for supporting healthy brain growth and development. Today, we will discuss how different factors can promote or inhibit healthy brain development. I find out this information very clear, and I hope you will find the information clear too. We are not going to be able to do some of the activities suggested by the curriculum because we are doing this training online. I personally think that all this information is very important for parents and caregivers because we want all children to thrive and develop to their full potential. So our practices should be well informed. This is an activity that we did in the classroom. It consisted in finding an object and then describing how the object is similar to the brain. For example, I use my cellular phone because I think a cellular phone is similar to the brain because it transports messages. If you want to share with the group, you are welcome. In the chat box, you can write what is something that you think can be similar to the brain and why. And without further ado, we're going to go to the next slide. And this is from baby to grown up. Researchers who have studied the brain maintain that the brain is more plastic or adaptable to making connections in our early years and become less adaptable as we grow older. A prime example is learning a new language. It takes more effort as we get older. According to this affirmation, there are times when a negative experience or the absence of appropriate stimulation is more likely to have serious and sustained effects on the child. We used to believe that the developing of the brain was genetically encoded, but research indicates that the brain's development in early years also depends on the environment. Nature and nurture contribute to the formation of synapses in the brain. For example, if a child experiences a dangerous environment, his stress response might be wired to be more easily activated and always be on the lookout for danger. According to this graphic, the plasticity of the brain never goes to zero. A human being has the ability to learn something new, but it becomes more difficult as we get older. How the brain develops. We are going to mention about the top functions of the brain and the bottom functions of the brain. The top functions assigned to the frontal and prefrontal cortex of the brain are also called executive functions. These areas are associated with higher form of cognition, higher order thinking, planning, reasoning, critical thinking. And the bottom functions of the brain refer to the brainstem. These functions of the brain that are needed for survival, like breathing, the heart beating, and others. According to research, the top functions of the brain take a long time to mature, and they are fully developed in the mid-20s, while the bottom functions of the brain are fully developed at birth. The amygdala and other functions, structures, are part of the limbic system, meaning the bottom functions of the brain. And remember that the amygdala is the part of the brain that influences the brain's reactions to different emotions. In other words, children are fully equipped to react to emotions at a very early age, and that is basically how they go in their interactions. Tapping, we're going to continue talking a little bit about the top and bottom functions of the brain. We must take in consideration that when the brain grows, it grows from the bottom up and from back to front. And the key for us as providers is to help children integrate the top and bottom functions so that over time the children are able to think through their feelings and manage them in ways that are acceptable. Research shows that by kindergarten, children who have a stronger emotional regulation are better able to manage everyday social interactions. Most educators maintain that our job as early childhood professionals is to nurture the executive functions in young children. I read a book written by Dr. Valora Washington, which was the CEO for the CDA Council. And she wrote in her book to Power to the Profession that our DNA as human beings is 96% or 97% the same as chimpanzees. And yet, we are incredibly different than chimpanzees. I really think that the 3% that sets us apart from chimpanzees includes the top functions of the brain, meaning the executive functions. There are some factors that are affecting healthy brain growth and development, and we are going to go through the list today. Number one, gene environment interactions, nutrition, sleep, exposure to toxic substances, diseases and disorders of the brain in early childhood, and the role of relationships. These five, this list, we're going to go through each one of them, and we're going to talk a little bit in detail about each one of the factors. Gene environment interaction, that was the first bullet. While DNA gives the body a plan or blueprint for building the brain, the environment can influence its ultimate development. The gene environment interactions of the brain are called epigenetics. Both positive and negative experiences can affect whether or not a gene is activated or deactivated. How can we apply this concept to the work that we do? There is a story, I don't know if anyone in the audience heard the story about Thomas Edison. The story goes something like this. It will say that when Thomas was a little boy, he went home and he gave his mom, a note from the teacher. The story says that the mom opened the note, she read it, and she put it away. Thomas was, of course, eager to know what was in the note, and he asked his mom. And mom responded that the note said that the teacher said that he was a very smart little boy and that he was going to do great. We know that later in his life, Thomas Edison became very famous. The story also says that Thomas found the letter years later, and he was shocked when he opened out the letter. And the letter was to inform his mom that he was a slow learner. Obviously, mom did something to deactivate the genetic disposition in his life. There are many stories like this. Now we are going to speak a little bit about the nutrients. We know that the development of the brain is influenced by nutrients, and that severe malnutrition can slow brain growth and thin the cerebral cortex, and also reduce the number of neurons connections between the neurons and the myelination. It is said that there is more activity in the brain of a 3-year-old compared to the brain activity of a child in college. This suggests that severe malnutrition can have a long-lasting negative effect on brain development. Here are a few questions for the audience. Where do we get information regarding balanced nutrition for children in care? How does your program have a way to know whether a family might be experiencing food insecurity? How do you talk to families about this issue? There are other things that we must remember. For instance, that because of the rapid pace of myelination in early life, children need a high level of fat in their diets until about 2 years of age. Breast milk or formula provides most of the fat during the first years. Whole cow's milk can be introduced after 1 year of age and continue until 2 years of age. At 2, a healthier level of fat is recommended. The development of the myelin is a long-term process in the brain development. This process begins during prenatal development, and by the time a child is about 5 years of age, most of the neurons are myelinated. Myelin is a substance that facilitates the connection between the neurons in the brain. We already spoke about the nature versus nurture and about the nutrition. Now we're going to go through this factor, which is sleep. Adequate sleep, especially deep or what they call REM, is extremely important for brain growth and development. And here is the daily recommended amount of sleep according to the American Academy of Pediatrics. For infants between 4 and 12 months of age, is recommended 12 to 16 hours. For toddlers, 1 to 2 years of age, 11 to 14 hours. For preschoolers, 3 to 5 hours, 5 years of age is recommended 10 to 13 hours of sleep. Amazingly, the brain doesn't quit working when the lights go out. Synaptogenesis is just as active during periods of sleep as well when a child is awake. Too little sleep in the first years of life has been linked to cognitive deficits and hyperactivity in the first grade. Insufficient sleep in infancy is linked to obesity in preschool. Exposure to toxic substances. Some substances used by the mother during pregnancy can negatively affect the brain development. We all know the effects of alcohol, cigarettes, street drugs, and some prescription drugs too, and more. Heavy metals such as mercury, lead, and manganese also in the environment can influence brain development. We know that exposure to lead can damage the formation of neural connections as well as the formation of the myelin and impair brain functioning in young children. Other factor that is influencing brain development is neurological disorders. These neurological disorders cause dysfunction in the brain or nervous system. It might be physical, physiological, behavioral, or cognitive symptoms that might arise and might be present at birth or develop later. This is a question for us as early childhood educators. What steps might you take if you are concerned about child's development or behavior? What are the things that we have to be prepared if we notice a developmental delay at an early age, and to provide the resources to the parents, and how we are aware of that? Challenges and solutions. If we were in the group, we will probably be having a small group conversations and talking among each other to find out about some challenges and solutions. But since we are doing this virtually, maybe we can have the discussion at the end of the presentation. Another huge component that is affecting brain growth and development is attachment.
She said everyone pretty much left the session, but I see people.
We know that relationships that very young children have with their regular caregivers will affect brain growth and development. And the definition of attachment is basically the enduring bond that children form with the regular caregivers at the beginning in the early years. This training mentions the study done by John Bowlby in England in the late 50s and 40s. He observed that teenagers with more intensive behavior issues were also more likely to have experienced the loss of a parent in the early childhood. This led him to closely study and develop the attachment theory and how our experience with our earliest attachments have a lifelong effects.
Yeah, imagine stepping on a lady with socks on upstairs.
Attachment has been into two categories. One is secure attachment, and the other one is insecure attachment.
No, I did not grab yours.
And children who experience relationships in which the primary caregiver provider is distant disengaged or inconsistent in meeting the child's physical or emotional needs, tend to develop insecure attachments. These children are unsure of when their needs will be met, which can result in a range of behaviors such as feeling uncomfortable to explore the environment and clinging to their caregivers.
Yeah, like I didn't see that.
Avoiding or ignoring the
Yeah, that's why
caregiver's
when we went to the
presence,
nest, and I was
even
like
when they are
that's why I'm
held
trying to explain the water
or
situation.
the
It was
caregiver
different over here
is
than
trying
hers.
to comfort the
That's
child.
just smack in the middle.
There is also a relationship between attachment and stress. It is said that the quality of the relationships impacts how children deal with stress. How children deal with stress affects overall development and functioning. This is another result on the attachment theory. Um, calming response.
Right when pink
What
eye,
do you do
your eye hurt?
to help your soul
No.
calm down from a
No, it
stressful
doesn't bother me. It
situation?
only bothered me when I woke up.
And the answer might be that you do some breathing exercise, listen to some
Yeah, when I
music,
said she was
you
gonna
might
try, but it's so
walk,
crazy
you
this
might
morning.
speak to a partner. You have certain ways to deal with stress.
Just go to that eye section. Okay.
But how do children deal with stress? We might see children chewing their fingers, or sucking in a pacifier, or rocking back and forth in their chair. Oftentimes, children need
How is that? Because she said she
caregivers
wants to take me.
to help
I've never been.
to give them strategies to calm down.
I've only been to California once. And down south.
There is another important fact that I found about stress in childcare. According to a Touchstone class, that is a tool that it is used for observations in the classrooms. I was surprised to find out that there is a lot of talk about toxic stress and that being in childcare is stressful. Environments are stressful. The normal cortisol patterns show the highest level at the beginning of the day, and the levels go down as the day progresses.
Hey,
but for 70 and 80, which is a high number for children in childcare, the cortisol levels actually increases over time. This shows at a physiological level that being in childcare is stressful. We know that when the brain interprets an event as stressful, the brain signals a cascade of reactions resulting in the release of epinephrine, otherwise known as norepinephrine, are fast-acting engage the sympathetic nervous system activated, quickening the heart and focusing vision. Cortisol helps to slow down bodily systems that are not necessary for survival, like the immune response, digestion, and many other systems. These slowdowns are this slowdown is useful in short spurts of time when we experience stress. We also know that when we experience a stressful situation, we go into a fight, flight, or freeze response. And we sometimes observe these responses in the young children. We see children on a fight mode when they try to run away, or they also experience these reactions. Stress in brain development. We know that as children grow older, they can better manage their emotions, but young children might have more frequent meltdowns. Why? Because very young children have limited ability to cope with stressors and depends on adults to help them cope with the stress. The part of the brain that controls reactions to stress is fully developed at birth. However, the forebrain, the part of the brain that controls thinking about feelings, memories, and experience, is still maturing. We remember the graphic that is showing that the brain matures from back to front, and back is all these emotion, whether the front part of the brain is the executive functions that are not mature at first. The stress continuum. In other words, based on this graphic, a situation that is causing normative stress might progress to toxic stress. The absence of support in a child's life makes stress less tolerable, resulting in constant fight or flight response of the amygdala in the brain. This reminds me of a college professor who was trying to explain this graphic to the students. And for this purpose, he asked the students to, to imagine they were holding a cup of water. Then he asked the students how will they feel after 5 minutes holding the cup of water. And then how you feel after an hour, and how you feel after 20 hours, how you feel after 20 days. So if you were holding this cup of water for long periods of time, your hand, your arm might come in pain and become numb and all those bad feelings. So toxic stress does not depend on the stressor, but if the situation persists for long periods of time without support, especially for children. Do children feel stress? Yes. Positive stress. It's also called normative stress. It's typically reactions to normal life that are not dangerous or threatening. And it's also a necessary aspect of healthy development for coping with everyday events. Stress is short in nature and often within the child's ability to cope with some scaffolding. So, positive stress is a necessary aspect of healthy development. These kind of stressors also help the children to develop grit and resilience as they learn to master these challenges and build self-confidence. There are opportunities for adaptation and mastery, and it builds coping mechanisms for the future. Some examples of some examples of positive stress in a life of child could be starting a new program, a baby having to wait for a caregiver to warm up the bottle, a child who is stressed out because he's not being the line leader, not getting a desired toy. All these are stressors in a child's life, but they are manageable. There is also another kind of stress, which is tolerable stress. And so, tolerable stress is longer lasting and more intense, but it is relieved by supportive relationships. And is, according to definition, is associated with higher cortisol release. May this rough brain architecture is prolonged and is supportive relationships facilitate a child's ability to cope. Some examples might be the death of a loved one, a divorce of the parents, experiencing a natural disaster. How we as adults, parents, and caregivers, what are the things that we do to help the children to manage this tolerable stress? Maybe we can discuss that at the end. So then we are going through the continuum of stress, and now let's talk a little bit about toxic stress. And according to the definition, toxic stress involves a strong and prolonged activation of the body's stress response, and is the absence of adult support. And cortisol continuously flows the brain, which can alter the way it develops. Toxic stress includes events that are continuously activating the stress response system with no protection or comfort to help a very young child to feel secure and calm. Some examples could be recurrent child abuse and neglect, severe maternal depression, parental substance abuse, family violence, and the ongoing effects of living in poverty. The limbic system becomes wired to see events most children will easily cope as very stressful and dangerous. For example, a 4-year-old who has been abused by his uncle might cry if and run when an unfamiliar man enters the room to read a story. These children are more easily provoked than other children and tend to fall apart. They are also more vigilant or sensitized to threat, resulting in a reduced capacity to focus and or building strong relationships. So this is a brain scan of the effects of toxic stress in the brain. The scan on the right shows the brain of a child who has experienced extremely adverse experiences. The amount of red indicates the brain activity. In the typically developing picture of the brain, we can see a lot of red areas, but on the picture on the right, we see lack of activity in the temporal lobe, which is associated with processing auditory stimuli, comprehension, language, behavior, and short and long-term memory. Thankfully, brain plasticity is greatest in early childhood. My question today is, what is the easiest thing? Is easier to build up or to tear down? And according to Montclair State University Center for Developing for Autism, how many positive interactions do we need to overcome one negative interaction? The answer is 4, according to the research. And this happens because negative experiences in our lives as human beings, they tend to linger longer than positive experiences. For example, if I tell you a joke for the first time and you find it funny, you might laugh about it. If I tell you a same joke, you might laugh again, but the third time, maybe it doesn't produce the same reaction. Whether negative experiences, we can cry over and over and over for the same event. So this is the learn Long-term impact of taxi stress. I don't know if you are familiar with the ACEs study, ACES. What we see here is that trauma is often the result of overwhelming amount of stress that exceeds one's ability to cope or integrate the emotions involved with that experience. In fact, adverse childhood experiences have been found to be a cause of death, um, risk behaviors, social malfunction, disease, disability, and in general, detrimental outcomes for children in adulthood. Um, Research conclude that adverse childhood experiences can literally get under our skin and become integrated into our bodies in the form of impaired brain structure, architecture, diminished immune system, poor metabolism, and poor cardiovascular function. Uh, the good news is that studies reveal that there are protective factors that can buffer children against adverse experiences in the early years. For example, in a long-term study, researchers found that children who had experienced adverse events in early childhood fare better as adults if they have a caring adult in their lives when they were younger. These are some of the 5 R's of healthy brain development that will help children overcome the the stressors in their lives. One of them is relationships. Another one is responsive interactions, respect, routines, and repetition. And we're going to study a little bit each one of them. Relationships, warm, loving, secure attachment relationships give children the foundation they need for healthy development. Um, there are other factors that are critical to healthy brain development, but a, this training, this curriculum from 0 to 3 is focusing on these 5 R's as they had the most power in our everyday interactions with young children and their families. Relationships uh, have to be maintained. What are the things that we as caregivers can do to foster relationships with the families and the children in your care? What about the things that we do to form relationships with children that you find difficult? Do you have an age range that you like to work with and why? Uh, Responsive interactions. A caregiver follows the child's lead, sensitive back and forth interactions, and adults tunes into the child. Please remember that children who challenge you the most are children that need you the most. Here are some tips that we can use to be present with the children. Number one, to identify your own feelings and those of the child, to identify your goals and the goals of the child. Is the child's goal to get attention? Is the child's goal to have some fun? If the children are disengaged, how I will get their attention and engage them back. And of course, to pay attention to the cues from our children. This is a very popular video that is called Save and Return. It's on the website for the Center for the Developing Child. I don't think we're going to have a time to watch the video today, but basically, responsive interactions is almost like a game. When you throw the ball and someone throws it back at you, and this is like a back and forth, and it's mutually enjoyed by both parties. Children know, they can sense if the caregiver is in tune, and if the caregiver is enjoying the interaction too. Um, this is also a very famous um, video from 0 to 3 and from the Center for the Developing Child. It's called the Still Face Experiment, and it shows what will happen to a child when the caregiver or the adult is not interacting with the child. If these circumstances are happening on a daily basis, uh, uh, my question is if this can become toxic stress in the life of the child. Um, all these reciprocal interactions can happen everywhere during diaper change, during feeding, during circle time, throughout the day. And of course, we have the art for respect, which is mean treating all children as valuable individuals, to teach and guide, no punish and shame, to show empathy, to understand the behavior, and to provide understanding and support. Um, what are the things that we do that are demonstrating that we show respect to parents and children? When we understand the temperaments, when we exercise cultural sensitivity, um, when we understand the sensory style of the child. Remember that respect makes children feel valued, safe, and secure, which allows them to focus their attention on exploring and learning. And the other art is for routines. It provides safety and security. They are important because it calms the bottom functions of the brain and allows the top functions of the brain. Routines are the predictable sequence of events that happens every day in the same way. The use of routines helps build brain connections that support memory and organizational skills. They also create a sense of security by helping children uh, know what, how, and when things will happen. So this the other R is repetition, and I used to think that repetition makes it perfect. Oh, but now I realize that repetition makes it permanent. Scientists have recently determined that it takes approximately 400 repetitions to create a new synapse in the brain, unless it is done through play, which takes only 10 to 20 repetitions. Remember that the brain operates in a use or lose principle, so repetitions are forming strong connections in the brain, especially in the area of language development. It's important to set realistic expectations based, based on brain development. Be aware that the experiences you provide are built in brain architecture and provide positive relationships and supportive, enriching environments. This is another video that we are going to skip for today. Basically, a child is participating in a sing-along activity, and the child seems to know all the parts of the song because probably he have This activity has been repeated many times, and the child seems to enjoy. How often we see children that want to read the same book over and over again, and that is okay, according to brain research. So this is an activity also done in the classroom. That is, it consisted in for the participants to do some illustrations and strategies for the 5 R's. We also going to skip this part, but if you want to share with the group what could be some of the strategies that we can use according to each age group, you are welcome, or you can type it on your chat box. So key messages: the brain is the most plastic in the early childhood, and the body's stress response is adaptive, but it can be harmful to brain development if it goes on too long without the help of a caring adult. And we have a powerful role to play in helping children regulate the stress and build healthy brains. To conclude, I would like to um, give you some words that we can be associated with positive and negative interactions. Positive, what it comes to my mind is trust, security, confidence, persistence, self-regulation, and also with some words associated with negative interactions would be caution, fear, alarm, withdrawal, and aggression. Thanks for listening. This concludes the PowerPoint presentation of the factors for brain growth and development from the Growing Brain Training Curriculum from 0 to 3. We are going to go now to answer some of the questions. Thank you.